Back before phones and social media took over the planet, we actually had to go outside, as kids. Maybe it's just where I live, but I don't see kids riding their bikes around, or playing ding-dong ditch, or doing any of those late-night troublesome kid activities anymore. But when I was a kid, and I'm talking anywhere from 9 to 17 years old, I was always outside with friends. At my childhood home, there was a park down the block from me that some of my friends and I would use as a hangout spot, especially at night, since our parents would get mad at us for being loud. The park was perfect because it had a small patch of woods on 3 sides, and then it faced the street on the 4th side, and across from the park was another small patch of woods. So basically, we didn't have any neighboring houses watching us or calling the cops on us for making too much noise when we were in the park. This happened when I was like 13, that age where we were riding bikes to get literally everywhere every day. I think that day in question was a Saturday, and we had ridden to a nearby pizza place a little earlier, then went back to my friend Tony's house, which was also not far from my house. The 6 of us were hanging out in his backyard until his mom came outside and yelled at him to either be quiet, send his friends home, or go hang out somewhere else. By this point, 3 of our other friends decided to go home. Me, Tony, and our friend Rob decided to go ride to the park instead of calling it a night. It was only about a 5-minute bike ride, and there was something so refreshing about riding bikes at night. It felt easier and more relaxing. So the 3 of us got to the park. And to describe the park besides its surroundings, the actual park had a small baseball field, a small bleacher stand, a couple typical park benches, and a pretty decently sized playground with a swing set. We would always chill on the actual playground because it was a cool elevated hidden service to just hang out on. At some point when we were chilling on the playgrounds, Tony went, "Shh, did you hear that?" And we all stopped talking for a few moments to listen. When nothing happened, Tony explained that he thought he heard a footstep or some kind of thump on the playground that wasn't us. So naturally, we all kind of took a quick glance around the playgrounds and ultimately didn't see anyone. But probably a few minutes later, there was a sound that we all heard this time, and it did sound like some kind of thud emanating from somewhere on the physical playground itself. Now, we were slightly unsettled because we were almost certain someone else was there making that noise. So we took another peep, this time actually getting up and walking around, and even calling out asking who was there. Of course, there was no response. So eventually we settled back down up on the playground. We boarded for another few minutes until we heard yet another sound. This time, it was a much more unsettling sound. It was the sound of a voice, a child's voice, and it came from inside the slide, one of those twirling metal slides you see at most typical playgrounds. I'm not going to lie, when we all heard it, we genuinely freaked out. Even though, yes, we did hear some weird sounds on the playground, we didn't hear anyone climbing into the slide, and the thumping sounds definitely didn't come from the slide. So naturally, I walked over to the slide and listened. Then I said, "Is someone in there?" And a voice said back, "Hello." It was a child's voice. I want to say a boy. They sounded like a toddler. I was 90% sure they said hello. My friends heard it too. We all gave each other these terrified looks. We had not heard anyone in the slide for the entire half hour we'd been there. I set down the slide. "Do you need help?" But there was no response now. In fact, we didn't hear the voice again. I had to assume there was a little kid stuck in there. So I climbed in and slid down. But as I slid down, expecting a child to appear around the corner the entire time, instead I made it to the bottom only to find it was empty. I then did a scan around the ground level of the playground and the surrounding area, and there was not a soul in sight. My friends were just as shocked as I was. There was literally not a soul besides us around, and I'm telling you, it was not possible for someone to have run away that quickly, especially not a young child. We checked every possible place to hide, and there was no one. We were already beyond freaked out, but when we heard the same voice once again come from the slide, this time saying, "Catch me," we all bolted for our bikes. We pedaled faster than we ever had. Back to my house down the block, we regrouped and caught our breath in my backyard. We were trying to be quiet, though, since my dad was likely asleep already, and he would get mad if we were loud outside. So we sat amongst ourselves talking about what just happened and any possible explanations. But things only got stranger when there was a knocking on the backyard gate. Yes, like someone was knocking, as if asking permission to come in. I said, "Who is that?" thinking maybe it was a family member, but it was an unfamiliar woman's voice. She said, "Hello," and then said, "Were you guys just at the park before?" We once again looked at each other in nervousness. There's a tiny crack in the gate where it met the fence that you could look through and see to the other side. So I peeked through it, and what I saw was a woman, middle-aged, standing on the other side with this big, wide, creepy grin on her face. And she was already looking right at me through the crack, as if she knew to do so. I stepped away from the gate because it was such a disturbing sight. I backed away and said, "No, sorry." The woman replied back, "Are you sure?" And Tony replied for me, saying, "No, we weren't." The woman said, "Okay, thanks anyway." I stepped back toward the gate to see if she left, but she was still standing there smiling and looking at me through the crack. We were so freaked out that we went inside my house through the back door. We quietly hung out downstairs for a while, completely shook. That woman, the 50-something woman, was terrifying, everything about her. My friends were scared to get their bikes and leave, so they slept over and left in the morning. We didn't go back to that park for a long time after that. If we really wanted to explain it all away, we could go with the explanation that there was a kid who ran away from his mother and was playing at the park, and the mother was looking for her child. But it doesn't make sense because we rode home so quickly that no one on foot would have been able to see where we went. Also, we know for a fact that we didn't see any kid running around the playground. So what the actual hell did we hear inside of that slide? Who was that? Who was the woman? At this point, it's a distant memory that will simply never be solved.